Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Saturday Morning Gaming Show. It is August 22nd, 2020, and I am your co-host, The Fat Wizard, joined today by...
Just Lobos.
Just Lobos, because Alamaxia is on assignment this time around.
That's right. He's out in the field.
Today we're looking at Might and Magic 6, The Mandate of Heaven. This was released on the PC April 30th, 1998. Truly the glory years of PC gaming.
A golden year, yes.
And this game is by far the longest game we have ever played and we'll talk about. And because I edit the videos, we're doing this for an hour and 10 minutes because I am a lazy editor. And come on, give me an extra 10 minutes to talk about this, how much I love this game. So, Lobos, this was your first time coming to the game.
It was.
I told you I would not be able to take it if you came back and you're like, nah, not for me. But here's your moment. Are you going to make me cry or smile?
Well, first off, I did not have enough time to complete it.
It's a very, very long game. But it took me like 2.5 months.
Yeah, but I definitely got into the meat of it, and there started to be kind of a pattern of dungeon crawling, and I knew what my goal is, but I'm very interested to hear how the latter part of the game kind of plays out.
Yeah, well, we got it all on video here, and I told you this game goes some places. It starts off pretty typical, cool fantasy stuff. We're actually looking at the intro video here. It's one of those poorly rendered CGIs, but still really good for watching. I love watching. It actually starts out with 4 party members. I guess they're like, these are your party members, but you actually get to select them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the gender. You can't select the race, so they're all human, unlike previous Might and Magic games. And then you select the classes. And so essentially what you hear about is there's like these things, these beings that come to the planet, and they come and conquer. And they have attacked, it was called like the Night of the Falling Stars.
Night of Shooting Stars. I see it in the video.
Stars, yeah. Yeah. And also, I'm probably going to just like dip into spoilers right away because I think it just kind of, it really ties into the story there. But what you find is the Night of the Shooting Stars is actually alien ships coming down to your planet.
Oh boy.
And the keen observer will know this kind of instantly, especially if they've played other Might and Magics, so not too big of a spoiler. But yeah, they come down to your town of Sweetwater, and the intro video shows your group fighting, and they escape. They jump down a well and they meet a wizard.
That's right.
Who, this well almost has like a network of tunnels and like villages. I don't know. It seems like a very large well.
It's the last place you would look for a wizard, so it's a good hiding spot.
I believe his name is Valagor, or Falagor. I think it's one of the two. Anyway, he says, hey, you have much to learn. Come with me. You are part of what's called, your existence and your quest here is part of what's called the Mandate of Heaven. And that's essentially the Mandate of Heaven. It's a fight that's been going on for the angels and the devils for many, many years, like 5,000 years. And the Mandate of Heaven is more or less the right to rule on this place, Enroth.
Sure.
Interestingly enough, no, I'm not a historical expert or anything like that, but this might actually come from there's a Chinese philosophy, political and religious teaching called the Mandate of Heaven, which is actually saying like if you are if you can hold the throne, it is your right to rule, and if you overthrow it. If you're overthrown, then it's their right to rule.
Sure.
So yeah, it's kind of just quickly looking into it. I found that kind of interesting. Again, there's a lot of information on the internet. If you want to know more, you can find that. But it was kind of cool to see that idea of almost like a Chinese philosophy come into a Western game, because in many ways this was the start of the Western RPG revolution. We think about JRPGs were dominant around this time. in the mid 90s. And this game, so again, they had Might and Magic 1 through 6, and those were good games. But this was a revolutionary thing and helped pave the way for, I don't want to say Western dominance, but like prominence in the genre. And then later on we see things like Baldur's Gate and other games like that. So there's a lot of interesting things you can kind of dig into and try to draw correlations. But ultimately, we're here to talk about how fun this game is. So
so I'll start off with just kind of describing what happens when you start out. As far as what the game looks like, you've got kind of a shrunken down 4x3 window that is actually your viewpoint, and it's with the updated controls, it's full on first-person shooter, like mouse look and WASD movement. Though I'm not certain what the default was. Was it WSAD movement or like arrow key movement?
Yeah, so it was, if I remember right, you could configure the arrow keys. So I think how the way I played originally was you would use either arrow keys or WASD to move, but then to like rotate, you'd use the arrow keys, and you'd use like the page up, page down to look up and down.
Yeah,
and, when you don't know any better, it's perfectly serviceable.
Sure, kind of like Doom, and they've got some auto aim on some of the attacks, so that you don't have to point directly up or down or even sideways. But yeah, so you start off and you're in front of this town, New Sorpigal, right, which is your kind of starter RPG town, and even after all the stuff that you explained, that kind of all seems way in the distance. Like you're just starting off as adventurers, and you talk to people in the town, and there's NPCs wandering around, and you mosey a couple of feet away from the edge of town, and suddenly there are a million mages and goblins attacking you, because that's what I experienced. And quickly you find out that that largely the game kind of focuses on hordes of enemies, and you're dealing with them, whether that be line of sight, just overpowering them, or just kind of pulling piece by piece of the giant bunch. So I learned quickly. I also experienced very quickly the option for turn-based combat, which I could see value, but honestly, I wasn't a fan of it. So I immediately went to real time and just kind of making it more of an FPS style game. Because do you use any of the turn-based stuff, or?
I do. Okay. Yeah. So let me let's wait a little bit until we get to more combat tactics, all right. And start a little bit more about like the start of the game. So you start at the game, you watch that little intro, and you get to make your character classes, and I think there's like 6 classes, and they actually did that. Those actually are decisions that will gate some progress. So for instance, warriors can use all weapons and armor. Wizards, they cannot use like heavy armor, but they can use the top tier spells. So although you can have a warrior that can use some other stuff, so for instance, you can have a warrior that knows about disarming traps.
Sure.
And so that's fine, but some classes may be better suited to that than others. Or like, for instance, a paladin can use light magic, but I don't think that they can use the highest level light magic. I could be wrong, but yeah, it's one of these things where you're going to want to have a pure wizard, a pure priest, and then 2 fill classes, essentially.
Gotcha.
Because the cleric or the priest and the wizard get access to some very powerful things you're going to want. So once you create that, your characters, you allocate some skill points and some skills there. Like, I want to learn fire magic. I want to learn, heavy armor or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then, you get dropped off in New Sorpigal, like you were saying.
Yeah, and I feel like I made an okay choice. Like, I wasn't...
Yeah.
I feel like based on how the combat was and when I approached areas, I did an all right job once I figured some things out. So I went with I don't know if it's fighter or warrior, a cleric, and then 2 sorcerers, which I wanted to spec kind of differently. And one of them most of my skills are very like thiefy. They're disarm traps, and I guess identify as kind of sorcerer as well, but yeah.
Excellent choices. So you're gonna want those magic powers, as well. So yeah, having 2 sorcerers or wizards, whatever they call them, are actually really good. So you talked about just kind of wandering around there. One of the things I really I do like about this game is it's very freeform, and there's a lot of different places you can go to.
Yeah.
And you can get yourself into real trouble, and I like that. You know, I enjoy games that you wander around and you're like, oh man, I just got one-shotted by this monster. And I saw you go into, very early on the game, you were in New Sorpergol, and there's some islands.
Yep.
And you're supposed to wait till you're a little bit stronger, and you get like a water walk spell, or you can get fly.
Yeah.
But you were like, oh, what if I just heal them as I'm walking through the water? And by the way, when you're walking through the water, it actually hurts you for some reason. I guess it's like, pretend you're drowning or whatnot. Yeah. And so you're like, you're right. All right, cool. I made it to these islands, and oh, there's a dungeon here. Cool. Let's go into this dungeon. And you go into this dungeon called Garrick's Forge, which is this place with it has a bunch of like lava in it.
Yep.
And these fire elementals, and and they just like kind of come up and shoot you, and instantly your guys are dead. And just watching your face on that was very fun to watch when you're streaming.
Yeah, I love.
But then like that's a cool place I can come to later.
Right, and that's probably where I'll go next. But I really like when games are open like that. It's kind of blocked off, like with the whole water thing, but you can still go there and you can get yourself into trouble. That's fine. Just understand what you're getting yourself into. So if I find places like that, I try to do just like a quick run through to see if I can collect any high level loot and then get out.
Oh yeah.
I don't think I managed to get anything there.
And sometimes I get a little bullheaded there. I'm just like, I'm gonna force my way through this, right? I'm gonna cheese everything. Yep. And we're kind of looking at the AI now. The AI, it's not super good around, especially going into if they're in a room, like so say they're in a large room and you're in a hallway connected to that room and they want to get to your hallway. A lot of times they'll actually pile up like on the corners of the room. Yeah. And so they can't quite make it into the hallway. So you almost kind of have to pull them. And again, this reminds me so much of the glory days of MMOs where there's the game that the developers intended to make, and then there's the game that they actually made. Right. And often you kind of have to invent the rules to understand and kind of game the logic of the AI. And I love that. It's like a game inside of a game. Yeah. Did you find any situations where you were kind of like cheesing the AI to maybe do stuff you weren't supposed to? Absolutely.
I mean, so I wandered into one area and there was at the end kind of a secret door, and then there's a big Minotaur king or something, and he's just by himself, and if he gets close to you or if he hits you with his projectile, it's almost instant death for anybody. And so I was like, well, we're definitely killing this guy. And I managed to get him stuck on some pots, and so I just peeked him with my bow and arrow multiple times for like 30 minutes, and then he died. And then I got a bunch of sweet loot and experience and all that, and that's okay. Like, it's okay. Yeah. So you can cheese things. If you feel shame cheesing, then that's on you.
Exactly. Yeah. Just I feel like you one-upped them.
Yeah,
right?
you outsmarted the enemy.
You found out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the developers, yeah.
So, let's actually then use that as a segue to get in, combat strategies. And here's what I did. And I saw that you eventually picked up bows. Bows are basically the item you want, right?
Yeah.
Because bows allow you to shoot from range, and they do considerable damage.
Yeah.
And so often here... Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that I'm still at the point, probably about 25, 30 hours in, that my fighter really doesn't do any melee combat. He's just got a bow. All of my characters have bows, and now I've started to use some more magic, so my sorcerers are actually doing some sorcery stuff. But if I don't have any like urgency for the combat, like I'm not kind of getting pushed into a corner, if I can just keep my distance, then it's all about the bows, man. Because there's no ammo, and all you're limited by is like how often you can attack again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so a lot of times what I would do is I would... So let's talk a little bit about the real-time versus turn-based, because real-time is basically enemies will walk at you continuously, and they'll attack you, and you have these 4 little gems at the bottom of your screen, and those gems, when they highlight, they indicate that you can attack. And so once you attack, you have some sort of cooldown. It's sort of dependent on the attack you used or the thing you did. Maybe I cast a spell and that will be a longer recovery time. Or maybe I shot a bow and I'm really good at bows, and so it actually reduced time. So it's not like everyone gets one turn. It's like you could actually get like 4 turns before the enemy gets their turn.
Right.
And so in both situations, you have a sort of cadence of combat, but the real-time stuff seems a lot more frantic. And so you can literally run around almost like a Doom thing.
Yeah.
And you mash the buttons and it will swing, or it will cast spells, or I will attack, and enemies will do the same for you. But if you hit the pause button, what it does is it then sort of orders, like, okay, this goblin over here, he gets to move forward and hit you. And then, okay, now it's your turn. Go ahead and swing your axe and hit the goblin. Right. And it's worth noting this game is all in first person. Even though you control 4 people, it's a the viewpoint is, again, think Doom as a quick example. You've got like sprites moving around at you and shooting stuff, but you're controlling these 4 characters, but you really just have a first person view. Mm-hmm. And so often what I would do to fight is I'd say you'd encounter like the hordes of enemies. Like, yeah, you mentioned before, this game is ripe with enemies. You walk into a room and there'll be like 50 enemies and you're like, all right. So run back in the hallway, and I do that in real time. And then I hit the pause button, which snaps to turn base. And then I turn around and there'll be a couple guys there. And so I'll shoot all those guys and I wait until they get close to me. And then I'm like, all right, I'm hightailing out of here. Go back into real-time mode, because in this version, Might and Magic 6, you can't actually move while you're in pause mode.
Yeah.
So you use that to then run away, hit the pause again, and then you kind of like keep kiting them, switching in and out of turn in real-time mode. And Lobos, I noticed you were doing something similar, but you were always staying in real-time mode.
Yeah.
Right?
I would basically just wait for all my party members to be, have their actions ready, and then I unleash a salvo of arrows wherever the nearest enemy is, and then I immediately usually duck behind, a wall or something, wait for my characters to recharge, and then if I need to cast heals or cast spells or whatever, then I do that then. And
so one thing I did notice that everyone deals with is the monsters are, when they walk at you, they kind of zigzag.
Yeah.
Right. Which is probably an artifact of their pathfinding. In any case, the zigzags actually make it a little tricky to hit your arrows, because your arrows are not instant shots.
Yeah.
They basically have to travel. And so if something's moving parallel to you, you're not going to hit it. But if you're in turn-based mode, they cannot actually move while you're firing. So it actually allows you a little bit easier ability to set your sights on and hit them with a spell or something. And also, I haven't looked into the numbers, but it really seems like your recovery times are faster, relatively speaking, in turn-based mode.
Yeah, I believe so. I believe somebody mentioned that you can kind of cheese by, after you do your attacks, then you really quickly enter and exit like turn-based mode, and you get your turns back faster, things like that. So
again, I like I like that people are like, hey, Lobos, why aren't you playing this game this way? And I'm like, hey, if that's the way you want to play it, that's cool.
That's right.
And I appreciate that. And this game offers the flexibility to say you could play this completely as a turn-based thing if you really wanted to, or a real-time thing, or a mixture of both, and you kind of use what you enjoy, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah, the one spell of contention in my chat is Wizard's Eye, right? So it's a spell that puts enemies on the mini-map so you can see where they are and stuff, and tactically approach things. And I have refused to use that.
I never understood. What is your grief?
Well, here's the thing. Oh, I mean, when I play Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that, I kind of don't like detect magic and things like that, because it really prevents the situations from being real surprises, which is the whole point. But I find that to be an interesting and fun part of the game. So I like to be going around a corner and being like, well, we'll see what's around this corner. And suddenly there's a million dudes, or like a huge minotaur that one-shots me. Like those sorts of moments I find to be interesting.
Actually, the way the Wizard's Eye works, they do not appear until you get line of sight on them.
Oh, well, sure. But I mean, even if I'm in the middle of a combat, like, where I'm doing my kiting and stuff, and I'm assuming where the enemies are, and then suddenly from behind, like, another one went around, and then it's like, ah! Like, I love moments like that. And
that's cool. I like that you kind of use the game's rule set or spells to customize your own adventure.
Yeah.
That's cool. And I didn't think about that. One of the things that is really nice about Wizard's Eye is it does show items on the ground. So it's like, you missed something. That is
helpful for sure, yeah.
And actually later on, as you skill up, we'll talk more about skills and mastery ranks here in a bit. As you scale up, it will actually start showing you areas of interest. So you can say like, oh, there's something in this dungeon that I can't figure out how to get to.
Right.
Maybe there's a secret passage around. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, so I could see using it for that purpose, like specifically, but yeah. On the topic of kind of core mechanics in this, we can talk about spells because of your characters that can use spells, you can set a quick action, a quick spell for each one, so that for me, it's Q will do a physical attack. That is, if there's an enemy at range and you have a bow, they'll shoot a bow. But if you're in melee range, then they'll do a punch or a hit with their mace or whatever instead. And then if you press E, then it will do a spell if there is a quick spell equipped. Otherwise, then it does melee or ranged, following those rules again. And then for anything else that you need to cast, as far as I know, I usually hit the C button, and then that will open a spell book of whoever's turn or whoever I have selected, because you can select your party members with 1, 2, 3, 4, and then kind of pull up their menus or use their actions in that way. So I'll usually do that. I'll be doing my ranged kind of bow stuff, maybe some spells, and then if I really need to heal, then I'll hit 3, which is where my cleric's positioned, and just mash C until I get that spell book to come up so I can get a heal off or whatever.
Yeah, because actually that's also one of the disadvantages of real-time combat. If you get hit, you momentarily lose your turn.
Oh.
Yeah, and so you can't get attacked when it's your turn in turn-based mode. So it's like if you wanted to heal, pause, let it go to your turn. But yeah, I can see like mash, get your spells.
Yeah.
That's one of the things. This game is in no way perfect. In fact, I could probably sit here and list 50 things right now that are a problem with it. None of those matter in my mind. Like this game is still brilliant. But yeah, when you're talking about spells, it is a little cumbersome to use because you can define one and only one for each character, like favorite spell.
Yeah.
So maybe on a wizard, maybe that's your fireball. On your healer, maybe that's your heal spell, right? But they give you so many spells, and so they have different categories. So you've got like spirit magic and body magic and mind magic. Yep. And like maybe body magic heals and spirit magic does some damage and buffs. And it's sort of, you have to go to a menu to really dig into your spells, and you're like, a lot of these spells are situational. Like, yeah, we're in the Tomb of Ethric the Mad, and there's a lot of undead in here, right? So maybe you have a spell that you wouldn't normally have or need, which is like destroy undead.
Yeah,
it's not a spell that you would normally have as your favorite because there's not a lot of undead. But when you come in here, you're like, oh, I want to be able to use this, but now you have two options: go to your book every time you want to use it, or set that as your new hot spell and then switch that. So, modern days, you could easily see like you could have like some sort of radial menu of like, all right, here's my 10 favorite spells that I can use, right? And that would be really cool. But at the same time, it's kind of cool to like open up your book and flip through the pages and be like, all right, okay, what do I want to do here?
Right.
Yeah. I can throw out some wasps, or I can try to fear the monster, or there's a lot of things you can play around with, right?
Yeah, I find it to be pretty cumbersome as doing it full real time. If I'm trying to, like, if I find myself just not really using quick actions, at least for anything. Like, I had quick action on my cleric as heal because that's the one that I was just using constantly, and then everybody else was like offensive attacks. So I would find myself trying to heal, and I would be doing offensive attacks, or vice versa, and then it would just kind of interrupt the gameplay. And I'm like, oh, okay, I don't need to cure right now, so just do a melee attack or something. But yeah, but I can see where like I'm okay with that being annoying, like because I'm actively choosing not to do the turn-based mode, at least yet. I just live with it. So I ended up taking the cure off my quick action bar. So it's all just offensive magic, so that if I want to, I just mash it, and then everybody does their offensive spells. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the dungeons. I went through. I think I actually completed all of the dungeons. Lobos, how many dungeons might you say you managed to get through?
I'm somewhere in the realm of 10 or so. I don't know how many. Okay. How many total are there? Do you know?
I think there's probably like 25.
Okay.
One thing I really like about these dungeons, and hopefully you picked up on this, each dungeon really seems to have an interesting mechanic or something cool about it. Mm-hmm. Like except for it's unfortunate that that there's that one of the, I think it's the second dungeon you go to. It's just infested with spiders and skeletons. And there's like 4 wings of them. It's just it's a slog.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Oh, you're talking about the Temple of Ba? That one?
Yeah, the Temple of Ba. That one, I'm glad that you managed to get through there and see through some other dungeons, because that one's a slog. But a lot of the dungeons had something really cool. So like, for instance, Goblin Watch, one of the very first dungeons you go through. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. There's like a little safe or whatever, a treasure vault, and you have to open up 6 doors in a certain way. Yep. Based on some clues. And do you remember the order in which you have to hit the button?
Yeah, because it was it Goblin backwards or Nilbog?
Yeah, that's cool. And one of the dungeons we just saw was the Tomb of Varn the Mad. And I think you went through this.
I did do that one. Yes.
And in this one, you're fighting liches.
Yeah.
And it's so cool. And a lot of this stuff, you get the sense that these are just fantastical D&D adventures.
Yeah, right.
And a lot of them have kind of like unique things on them. Like I remember there was one of the dungeons that had a bunch of cannibals on there, and you saw the floor was like shimmering. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you're like, well, maybe I should walk on the shimmering floor, and sure enough, it doesn't damage you, whereas everything else does. So you kind of have to follow these things, right?
Yeah. On first glance, I assumed the opposite. It was like, oh, I see. Yeah. The shimmery floor is the dangerous floor. Don't step on that. But then I got poisoned, and I was like, oh, dang it.
And there's another one. I think you went to on one of the last streams I saw, which was I think it's like the Fire Lord's Temple or something. And there's these pieces of amber that you need to go pick up.
Yep.
And there's like almost like if you imagine like a rock grinding facility where there's like a chute and there's like 10 different exits from that chute.
Yeah.
And it's one of these things where you can pick one of those. So you feed down, and then you pick one of the chutes to go down, and then you complete that little chute, and then you come back and you pick another chute. And so a lot of these dungeons, they're not just like run through and kill a lot of enemies. I mean, they are, let's be honest. That's what you do. But a lot of these do have really cool mechanics, and it's fun to see every dungeon like, what's this one going to be about?
Yeah. And trying to figure out, because usually there's like maybe like one big secret or something for each dungeon.
Yeah, like you get a letter that kind of hints at like what's going on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, let's go talk a little bit about the story, because you do kind of see in some of these dungeons, you'll get a letter, and you get the sense that all of this stuff is being connected. So what is happening here is there are these alien race called I think it was called the Kriegans, and so they're sort of like a devil-like race, and they come to nearby planets and they more or less take them over.
Okay.
And so they came to your planet, which is Enroth. I guess they call it a world, not a planet, but in the start, it's clearly a planet. So yeah, these spaceships come infested with Kriegans, and they attack. And what they actually do, it's more clever than just killing everyone. What they actually do is they form a cult called the Cult of Ba.
Yeah.
And what they're trying to do is basically like establish a foothold of worshipers to try to overthrow the Iron Fists, which are basically the leaders of Enroth. And again, going back to the mandate of heaven or the divine right to rule.
Right.
And so actually immediately at the start of the game, you get a little letter and you have to deliver it to some guy in an inn, and it talks about, Ba. So you hear about Ba all over the place throughout the game. And I'll say that reading up on the story makes the story sound more fascinating than it actually is. Lobos, did you really get into the story through the text here at all?
Kind of in a temporary way, I'm doing a dungeon or whatever, and I read the story, and I'm like, oh, okay, this gives what I'm doing a little bit of life. That somebody was here doing this, or it's like, give this letter to other guy and don't tell anybody else, and this is a secret. And you're like,
yeah, that sounds suspicious.
Yeah, and I delivered the letter to the guy in the inn, but it's not something I've kept up with, and with my spaced out game time, it's not something I've been able to form a cohesive kind of idea in my head.
Yeah, it's again, I've played this game 3 times. I could not explain the story to you if I just played through the game. Again, this is one of those where a king will tell you, go do a thing. He'll give you a text block and you're like, go do a thing. This is why you should do a thing. And you do the thing and it takes 10 hours. And then you come back and you're like, I don't know. I have like a gong here for you. I think I was supposed to bring this back to you, but I don't remember why.
Yeah.
And he's like, thanks. You gave me the gong. I'm like,
oh, cool.
Okay, so I'm gonna go on to the next castle and see what I do next. Right?
I still have a gong in my inventory, so I'm waiting for that guy to pop up who's like, oh, my gong.
So again, you can kind of just go into dungeons, and in the same way like Skyrim, a lot of the times you'll go into a dungeon because you stumble upon it, and you're like, oh, cool, what's this? And you'll get to the end, it's like, quest completed, and you're like, what? and you're like skipped over 10 steps to the quest, and you just got to the end, and you're like, well, that probably would have been more interesting if I knew why I was going here at the beginning.
Yeah, I rescued some lady, and I was like, oh, yeah, I guess you can travel with us for the next, however many days. And then eventually, down the line, I found who she belonged to, or who her family was. And I was like, sweet.
Was it a damsel in distress?
It wasn't. I have that quest, though.
Oh, you have that
It was
quest.
the other lady.
Different damsel.
Cheryl.
Yeah.
Her name was Cheryl or Sherelle.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Cheryl.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the damsel in distress is actually one of the main quests here. So what you're supposed to be doing in this game is, Falagor, he gives you, he basically says like, hey, you got to go kill the Kriegans here. But in order to do so, you need guidance from the Oracle of Enroth. All right, cool. That's in the city of Freehaven. Okay, cool. So go to Freehaven. And by the way, Freehaven is a huge city. I would consider this like if there was a capital city in Enroth, this would be the capital. There's lots of shops. There's lots of stuff to do there. So you get there, and the High Council. I don't know if you found this, Lobos.
I found them. They all have their thumbs pointed down at me.
Down,
yeah, they're like, nah,
like snubbing you. And you can talk to them each individually, and they're like, hey. I will support you to see the Oracle only if you complete my lords, or you receive the blessing from my lord.
Right.
And you're like, all right, cool. Well, let me go to each of the lords, and there's 6 lords, and each of them, they're like, I need to promote you. And they're like, all right, cool. What do I need to do to promote? And you actually have to do 2 quests for each of the lords. So essentially there's 12 quests you have to do. And then after you do that, you can see the Oracle. Not quite, but we'll get into that a little bit. There's one more thing you need to do. And so there actually confers a couple other benefits to getting those ranks. So for instance, if you're a knight, you start out, you choose, I want to be a warrior.
Right.
It's like, all right, great. We're going to, once you complete one of the guy's quests, he's like, I promoted you to the rank of knight. And then after that, it's like if you do the next one, he promotes you to like Cavalier.
Yeah, that's where I'm at right now. Works, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you might be asking, like, what's the point of all that? Well, so now let's go into the rabbit hole of skills, right?
Oh boy.
So what skills are basically your ability to perform things like attacking with a sword or casting fire spells or lockpicking, or not lockpicking, but like disarming.
Mm-hmm.
As you level up, you get some points, and you can put those towards your skills. And so that's sort of like a linear progression, and each of the skills does something different. So for instance, let's say perception, or let's say disarm as a skill.
Right.
Disarm, if you mouse over it, it's like, at rank 1, you basically get as many points as you put into the skill. So basically, like if you put 10 points into the skill, your skill at disarming is like 10.
Right.
Okay. It's an arbitrary number, but it's better. But then they also have ranks or levels, and they can be like novice, apprentice, and master, I think is how
I think it's expert and master.
Expert, yes. Novice, expert, and master. And in order to rank up in those, you have to do certain things. So some of them are, like to be master in swordsmanship, say, you may need to be a cavalier. And so you actually have to find a trainer. So let's say that you go from novice to expert. All right, cool. I got to find the expert trainer to swords. And he's like, usually that's pretty easy. Usually he's like, oh, you only need like 4 points in swordsmanship to be better at swords. Mm-hmm. And now maybe all your sword damage deals double what it would do normally. And you're like, all right, cool. And then you look, all right, what do I get as a master in swordsmanship? And then maybe master is like, oh, you can use 2 swords. You can dual wield swords. Mm-hmm. And you're like, oh, that's amazing. How do I get that? And so it's like, well, first you have to be a cavalier, and you have to find the master swordsman and have him train you. And often those are in, high level areas. So each of the skills has that series of progression. And for me, I love that, because I always feel like I have short-term goals where it's like, all right, well, I want to get my leather skill up. How do I do that? Go do this quest. Okay, did that quest. Now I can get that up, right? Mm-hmm. Did you enjoy that mechanic, Lobos?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me. There isn't, it's kind of not arbitrary, but it's not consistent, like when you can level things up. Some of them are locked behind, like you were saying, like kind of quests that you complete. But for the most part, leveling, as I don't have any masters yet, so I've only done expert. So I don't know about the later stuff, but where I am now, my understanding is that, okay, I get enough XP. Whenever I have enough XP, you go to a training ground and you pay a little bit of gold, and then you can actually level up there. And when you level up, you earn skill points, and then you put those into those skills. And then from what I know, a lot of magic is like 12 for master, and then like 4 12 for expert. And so that's kind of what's in my head, unless there are specifics. And in that case, then I start just Googling, like, why can't it be a master yet?
That's usually right. And I love the spells because they really give you a sense of progression. So for instance, one of the early spells is Bless. Yeah. And you look at Bless and it says, all right, cool. You can cast Bless on one character and it lasts for 5 minutes. You're like, well, this spell's stupid. I don't want to do that. And then like maybe Bless as an expert, you're like, oh, well, you can cast it for 15 minutes. And you're like, oh, well, that's actually kind of ususeful. Yep. And then Master's like, well, you can cast it for 30 minutes and it affects the whole party. Yeah. And you're like, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
At the beginning of the game, with the cleric, you've got, it's not even cure wounds. I think it's first aid. And that's your heal. Yeah, and you're like, oh, okay, I just, walked over a trap. My whole party's hurt. Okay, let me heal them up. Oh, single target. Wait 5 seconds. Okay, next person. Single target. Wait 5 seconds. So, and it doesn't take too long to get to the point where you can AoE as long as you're kind of focusing on that. And it makes it so much better, especially like you were saying with Bless. This game has a very... the buffs in the game are very powerful and almost necessary. So since my group has a bunch of crossbows or bows, their accuracy by default is really low unless you have this spell Bless that you put on your party. And then it's like they're like 80% accurate, and it's pretty good. But without that, I couldn't imagine how long it would take to kill things because you're missing a lot. And then on top of that, there's also, I keep calling it might, but I don't remember what it's actually called. It gives your party,
It might be strength.
Yeah, it gives your party more damage when they deal.
More damage. Sure.
Yeah, when they deal like melee attacks, because I don't think it applies to the range attacks. But there's all sorts of buffs like that are by default single target, but then you can make them AoE, and then I love the idea of just going, all right, put on all my buffs, like ding, 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 take like 2 minutes to buff your entire party. Well, not 2 minutes, but 30 seconds to buff your whole party.
It does take a while.
Yeah,
right?
and then
it gets easier.
Jump in, and then you're like, I am a god for the next 5 minutes plus my skill in spirit magic. Sweet.
Exactly. And so, like, for instance, I just want to look at some of the spells here that you would cast. So let's say you healed up and you're ready to go adventuring. You're like, all right, cool. I'm going to cast Precision on my characters. I'm going to cast Speed on my characters. I'm going to cast Wizard's Eye. I'm going to cast Fly. I'm going to cast Protection. And so it literally takes 5 minutes, right? But then you get to one of the cities. It's a little bit deep into the game, and you find new spell categories. And you're like, what is this?
Uh-oh.
And there's light spells and there's dark spells. And so you're like, oh, that's interesting. Okay. So what sort of things do I get from here? So you look at light spells, and there's one called Hour of Power.
Oh.
And what that does is it casts haste, heroism, shield, stone skin, and bless on the whole party.
Oh.
And they're like, what? And then there's one called Day of the Gods. It casts power, meditation, speed, lucky day, precision, and guardian angel.
Oh my gosh.
And you're like, what? This is great. And then there's on the dark spells, there's Day of Protection, which protects from all the elements. And so you see this, you're like, the game just changed on me. I don't care about any of these. I don't care about body magic anymore. I'm all about light magic and dark magic.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so those things, and as you can see on the video here, I have all the buffs up. And it's, it's one of those things. You wake up and you kind of buff your characters real quickly, and you go out to adventure. And by this time, did you find Town Portal at all?
I did, yes.
Okay. But you're not a master yet. So Town Portal, I think at your level, just brings you back to the last fountain that you used, right? Correct. Yeah. So did you get Lloyd's Beacon at all?
I do believe that I got Lloyd's Beacon.
Okay, so the way Lloyd's Beacon works is it essentially allows you to puts down like a spot where you're like, remember this spot, I want to teleport back to this spot. And when you get powerful enough, what you end up doing is you're in the middle of a dungeon and you cast Lloyd's Beacon. You're like, all right, I'm going to save my spot here. I'm going to go Town Portal back to the first town because that's the cheapest.
Right.
And go to the temple, heal all my magic and my health, and that costs a total of 40 gold. Yep. By the way, I'm rolling in like 20, 30, 40,000 gold this deep in the game. So you spend 40 gold, heal up, go back, and then boom, you're ready to get back in there, and you don't have to rest up. You don't have to let time go by. And so you get to the point where you're just like flipping in and out of dungeons. You're like, I am unstoppable. It is such a great feeling, especially because these are all things that you kind of earn, and you feel like you're getting more powerful, and things are becoming more easy. And I think this is where this game shines, is that progression to the point where you're like, oh man, I can just go to this town. I can just go over here. I can fly around. I can do so many. I can walk on water. There are so many things I can do, and I just love that feeling of just like, accessibility. Like in the same way, like you almost think about like a Metroidvania type thing, right? Where like, oh, now I can blow up these walls here. I can go on these other areas now.
Yeah.
So that is one of my favorite things. Is really just leveling up those skills.
And there's a lot of leveling to do, and a lot of skills out there too. So
I completed the game about level 85 on all my characters. There is no level cap at all. and you're really experience gets to a point where the gold is actually what prevents you from leveling up more than the experience. So I think my characters probably had another like 10 levels in them. I didn't have any money. For whatever reason, later on in the game, it gets a little. Some of the dungeons don't really drop any items or loot, so you're kind of just coasting on fumes there.
Sure.
I want to talk a little bit about light spells and dark spells because the mastery of those is kind of interesting. So one of the things in this game is a reputation system, and as you do good things like saving damsels in distress or killing villains, you increase your reputation. And in order to get the trainer to give you light mastery, you have to be saintly, which is like crazy high. You have to be really, really good. And to get mastery in dark, you have to be like what do they call it? Whatever, it's like devilish-y or whatever.
Okay.
Basically like as evil as you can be.
Interesting.
And so the strategy I use for this is I got my thing up to saintly because it's much easier to ruin your reputation. I think Lobos, you even noticed this. You accidentally attack some
well, accidentally,
town,
not
right?
accidentally. It happens.
Yeah. Well, who's counting?
Right.
But if you attack like villagers, you'll lose your reputation. So I first got my saintly one up, and I'm like, all right, no, this is going to be very easy to get a bad reputation. Did you? I guess you didn't get the spell called Armageddon because that's a dark spell.
I did not.
So Armageddon hurts everyone on the entire map. And you can only do it outdoors.
Right.
And so if you want to really get people angry at you, you go in there, you cast Armageddon on a town, and now everyone hates you. Unfortunately, I forgot that if you go in and talk to the nobility, who you're trying to complete quests for, they'll throw you in prison.
Ooh.
So I was like, hey, I'm ready to complete a quest. You got thrown in prison for a year.
Wow.
And I was like, oh no.
Oh my gosh.
And this game does have time passage.
Yeah.
And things actually do respawn, right? I don't know if you noticed any things respawn.
Well, I've asked about it, and people said that it takes like a year in-game time for dungeons to respawn and stuff like that. Or I don't know exactly how long. But that seems like a possibility if you're looking to grind some XP. You just, get devilish and then Armageddon everybody, go to prison, and good to go.
Yeah. Now, interestingly enough, age actually does affect your characters. I don't know if they can die of old age, but I think they actually lose. I'm not sure on the specifics, but I do know age affects either your max hit points or your strength at a certain point. It starts going down.
Yeah, I was gonna ask because I have a scroll, I think, of like divine. I can't remember what the spell's called, but it temporarily gives you like a ton of stat increase or something, but then also adds a year to your age. Yeah. So
there's a lot of really cool stuff like this that just they don't really make sense in the context of the game. So for instance, the highest level light spell is called Divine Intervention. It restores the entire party, but it ages the caster 10 years and works on a rising or setting of the sun only. What? Again, thematically super cool, right? Yeah. But it's like, well, what player is going to be like, yeah, eat 10 years of my life, and I happen to need this on the setting of a sun, right? How about this? Why don't I just town portal back to that temple that heals me up for like 10 gold? Yeah, and stuff like that, right? So again, there's some really cool thematic things here that don't quite work. Also, a lot of the spells are really useless, unfortunately, as it turns out. So one of the mind spells is called Mass Fear, which forces all visible enemies to flee. I don't know, Lobos, did you try anything?
I've seen it in the shop, and I think I have not bought it, or maybe I did buy it, but I haven't used it.
The problem is the spells like that are broken. And they don't really work, or they work really situational. I'm a little fuzzy on them. But I think anything that does status effects like, charm or mass fear, I think they actually only work in real time, which maybe would work in your situation, Lobos. But yeah, for some reason they just kind of snap out of it in turn-based mode.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's a little weird. Again, there's a lot of really cool spells here that seem like they'd be really fun to play with, but when you check them out, you're like, oh, this isn't actually all that great.
Sure.
Like turn to stone, right? That sounds awesome. Until you realize now you can't kill the enemy, you turn to stone, and you just got to wait for it to wear off. You actually want to kill it. Like the idea of turning something to
that's
stone,
crowd control.
Well, yeah, crowd control, but then I want to actually like fight the thing when I'm ready to, right?
Sure.
Whereas it's like, well, I guess should I rest here for an hour and let it
get ambushed by more? Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about the progression through the game here. We've been focusing a lot of on skills and spells. We are in Dragon Sand, and Dragon Sand is really cool because it's full of like dragons, of course, and these lizards, like lightning lizards and worms. And by the time we're here, we're getting to some really cool monsters. You start out fighting goblins and spiders and stuff, and now we're fighting dragons and large lizards, and things are cool. Yeah. One of the cool things as you're exploring Dragon Sand is you see this big pyramid. Think about the pyramid of Giza there. And it's called the Tomb of Varn. And this place is cool because it's got this ancient Egyptian look to it. You actually fight like these Anubis things, but you're also getting kind of hints of like, this doesn't seem like it's from this world.
I see your party taking a ton of radiation damage right now, so
yeah.
that's...
No, I mean, I will say radiation does happen in the natural environment, right? But yeah, I've also got this item called a crystal skull, which is absorbing radiation.
Oh, I've seen that
damage.
Indiana Jones movie.
Yeah. and actually, I think some NPC you talk to actually is like, yeah, this thing just appeared there one day, and it seems to be made of some material I don't really know. And you're like, all right, well, things are kind of getting real interesting here, right?
Yeah.
And again, you should have been getting fed a little bit of information that just kind of cluing you in to what might be going on. It's going to start getting real here soon. And in fact, we've already got some more clues because we went through a couple castles. I think Castle Atmos was one of them. And there is it's called like, what do they call it? It's like a Sphere A.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember what it's called. Like a memory sphere A, memory. No, it was gamma, alpha, beta, and gamma. So you pick up these things. If you think about like the old Doom games where they have like the little power up that's like a little blue face.
Yeah.
I think that like supercharges
like
you.
Invincibility or the Mega Health.
Yeah, so think about one of those. It's sort of like, it's a little lighter blue and it's transparent. And you pick it up and each of these very, very long dungeons has one of them. You can kind of hear like almost like a humming around the area. So you know that there's one of these. And you pick it up. You may know what it's for by then, but not necessarily. And you pick this up and you're just like, all right, well, this is weird. It says quest item, so I can't get rid of it. So I'll just sit here and let it sit here. And what you find is eventually you'll get the oracle. You'll get permission to view the oracle or talk to the oracle, and the oracle will start to tell you a little bit more about the fight against the Kriegen and how this is sort of like a interstellar galactic war. And I don't remember exactly what these memory things were, but yeah, essentially you have to go collect all 4 of these memory crystals to be able to access like the core.
Oh shit.
And you're like, yeah, it's like, all right, that's kind of interesting.
Now, is this the core of the pyramid, or is this actually a place called the core?
So this is actually the core. So when you go to the oracle's place, right? So, you got the guys, all their thumbs are sticking straight up or down. Well, in your case, they're down, but when you get all their approval, they stick up. And they're like, all right, you can go visit the oracle. So you go down into the oracle, and once you place all those crystals or memory things in the oracle, another thing opens up. Actually, I think I might be a little I think I'm a little wrong there. You have to place all 4 of those before you can actually meet the Oracle. I'm sorry.
I gotcha.
We'll get into that a little bit here. I want to talk a little bit more about the Tomb of Varn because there's some cool stuff in here. In the very center, it looks suspiciously like it kind of looks like a bridge, like a starship bridge. Not quite, but enough that you could kind of like squint and be like, I could see how this could be a starship bridge. And there's in here there are like these little puddles that you have to stand in. And if you use the puddle, it says like, all right, what is the commander's or what is the captain's code or whatever? And it's like, what is the first lieutenant's code? And you actually find these codes throughout the Tomb of Varn here. So it's an absolutely huge dungeon filled with like genies and Anubis. Mm-hmm. And you find these 6 things, and you realize some of these words look very familiar. In fact, they look like backwards names of Starfleet captains from Star Trek. They literally do like, all right, so they have like Uhura, Kirk, Spock. And so the code names are like Spock but backwards or Kirk backwards. Nice. And you're like, all right, what is going on here? I thought I was playing a fantasy game, and now we're pulling Star Trek references here.
Why not?
Yeah, why not? So it's kind of a fun little nod there. And I feel like these older games were ripe with those little Easter eggs, right?
Oh yeah.
So the doctor's code was one of them. The McCoy is the doctor's code, and then the captain's code is Kirk there. And I think what happens, we're going to see this in just a minute here. I think once you enter in all 6 codes, I believe it opens up like a central core to the Tomb of Varn. And again, the Tomb of Varn is that big pyramid thing inside of Dragon Sand. Yeah, and I'm trying to remember what you get. We'll just sit here for a minute and see. Yeah, so once you open it, the waters part, and all of a sudden you see like rust and iron grates, and you're like, well, this is not what I expected at all. This is the first time you're like, this is legitimately some sort of like science fiction thing, right? And then droids start coming out with lasers that shoot you, and you're boy. Now, mind you, at this time, you're still shooting arrows and hitting people with swords and magic, right? This is what I love about these old fantasy games. A lot of them did this. Like Wizardry did this a lot. I think even the early Might and Magics might have. I absolutely know for a fact that Might and Magic 7 continued on this. Lobos, do you remember any games that did this whole like, all right, it was aliens all along sort of thing?
Man, I'm sure there is. I'm blanking right now, but definitely, I'm liking this sudden transition where you think you know what you're doing, and then you're in the middle of something completely different.
Yeah, absolutely. So we just did see in the Tomb of Varn, you get a memory crystal.
Okay.
And you need that to consult with the Oracle, which is coming up here. And so, again, they kind of spell it out at the beginning of the game, but at the same time, when I hear about like, oh, they came from beyond, even though they showed like outer space and everything, I wasn't thinking aliens. I was thinking like, I don't know, just alien bugs. I don't know. I don't know. Did you even think of sci-fi being like the way this game was going to end up here, Lotus?
I mean, it's easy to forget after you're playing for dozens of hours and it's just kind of standard, D&D RPG kind of medieval setting. But, if you watch the intro, it's like it shows like the planet from space. And so you're like, oh, okay, all right, maybe they're just showing me the planet. But there's definitely hints about all this stuff, and it's talking about conquering and
yeah, it almost kind of makes you want to go back to the beginning of that video, right, and be like, oh yeah, that's okay. So a little bit of background on what's going on here. So we are actually trying to more or less get access to the Oracle. The Oracle is actually a sentient computer.
Oh my gosh.
Created by the ancients. So I don't know what the ancients are. And there's the reigning king, which actually has gone missing. His name was Roland, and actually you meet, I think it's his kid.
Oh yeah,
Nikolai,
yeah.
and he kind of runs off for the circus. That's a whole.
My Nikolai
thing,
has
right?
been lost for months.
Yeah, well, good luck. It's tough. I had to look up that one because one of the things, you basically have like 3 circuses. It's like Circus of the Winter, Circus of the Summer, and so you can go there and you're like, oh, it's January, it's the winter. It's like, well, no, you have to be there in like February.
Yeah, I did find
only one of them.
I did find one that was closed, so maybe I'll just keep rechecking that one.
Yeah, definitely do that. So we've got access to the Oracle, and the Oracle tells us that in order to more or less purge the aliens from the planet, you need this like really powerful spell, which allows you to blow up this thing without affecting the entire population through like the radiation or whatever.
Hey,
I
mean, that seems like an ultimate awesome goal to have in a game like this, right? If you're doing all this spell casting, it's like, oh, you must get the ultimate spell, like Ultima in Final Fantasy or whatever. So that's cool. Super cool.
And in order to do so, and hopefully you'll remember this, but if you go up in Castle Iron Fist, there's like an art room, and there's a man in a statue. Well, he's actually just turned to stone.
Oh.
And so you can actually turn him. He's like a very powerful spellcaster. Basically, Roland's, he's an usurper, his brother, Archballad Iron Fist. And so because he tried to usurp the throne, he got turned to stone. But anyway, you turn him back to flesh, and he's like, all right, cool. You gave me the stuff I needed. I will give you the spell you need to cleanse basically protect the planet.
Sure.
So you get all this, and you're like, all right, you finally go to the core, and you're ready to... you actually are now going into the core of the Oracle. So the Oracle basically like grants you access. And so you run around in here.
Oh, gosh.
You open up treasure chests, and you get blaster rifles.
Perfect.
And I know that you saw this because you're like, ancient weapons, what the heck is that? But yeah, there's a skill you find in New Sorpigal. There's a trainer for ancient weapons, and that's what these are.
Wow.
Ancient weapons are blasters. Now, if you look at how they're holding it, by the way, when you add stuff to the inventory, that's all like paper dolls. But when they hold the gun, they're like holding it from the barrel upside down.
Maybe they just throw the guns at people or hit them over the head.
Actually, no idea. So it's like, imagine holding a sword, but instead of a sword, now you just have a gun pointed straight up. It's so ridiculous. It's really funny because there's 2 types of weapons. There's a blaster rifle, which is like, think of like holding like a sniper rifle by the barrel upside down, and then you have just a blaster.
It's like a staff or something.
So yeah, exactly. They kind of, I'm not saying they should have changed the art. In fact, I think that almost makes it better.
Yeah, no, I think
so ridiculous.
I think it's good.
So you get your whole party with blasters, and now you're just this annihilation machine where this is the part where I actually just go in full real time and I hold down the fire button and you just spam blaster fire. And in fact, it's even better when you're flying around because then you feel like a shooter. Flying death machine. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It's crazy.
Oh boy.
So you go into this this core with the intent of getting some blaster rifles. By the way, there's a couple status effects. I know that, Lobos, you saw a bunch of these. Mm-hmm. One of them is like you're unconscious. That just means that you need to rest up or heal up, right? You're kind of knocked out of the fight. Then there's dead, which means you can still resurrect them, but they need to be resurrected to be able to fight again, right? And you can actually go to any temple and resurrect.
Sure.
Then there's one more called Eradicated.
Oh, yeah.
And that is something that these droids can do. They can eradicate your character. And temples cannot bring you back from eradication. You have to use like light magic to do so.
Wow.
And so, but at this point, your guys are so powerful. It's like, all right, whatever. Just cast a different spell and boom, you're ready to go.
Well, they're using these. They're using these big blasters and stuff. So I can imagine you're just, instead of just receiving a fatal wound, you're getting completely blown apart by fantastic technology. So, yeah,
it's so fun. And so the very last thing is you free the Archballad, and the Archbald. What is his name?
Archibald?
I say the
Archibald?
Archibald. I don't know why I said Archballad. Anyway, you finally go back to Sweetwater, which was your hometown, and it's so sad. It looks like a meteor has hit, because a meteor did hit. And it's very, very empty. A lot of the buildings are kind of blown up. There's devils around, and a lot of the trees are ashen. So it's very...
Oh no!
Very sad, and actually, kind of some sad music comes on. And with a town like Sweetwater, the town is called Sweetwater inside of Paradise Valley. So when you get there, you're like, oh, that's kind of sad.
Whoops!
But you get to the very last area called the Hive,
oh boy,
which is kind of an alien sciencey structure here with hordes and hordes of demons. We just walked into the entrance here, and there's probably, I don't know, 60 to 80 demons that are all flying, waiting to kill us.
Now, at this point in the game, do you have, I know you have Armageddon, but do you have some indoor spells that can just mass AoE and take these guys out, or is it still a lot of...
The best you have is at light magic. You have something called Prismic Light, I think
Prismatic Light?
Prismatic Light, yeah, that's right. And actually, some of the devils are seemingly immune to it, so they'll kill like some of the weaker ones, and it only does things in your line of sight also.
Gotcha.
So you kind of just have to... Actually, what the best spell is Dragon's Breath, because that's like a fireball, but upgraded fireball. You can actually kind of race yourself all the way down to the Hive, and you get into the reactor, which is this weird like mechanical thing that's got like ooze. It doesn't do much. It shoots a little bit at you. By the way, you need blasters to kill the reactor. You cannot kill the reactor with anything else. And once you blow up the reactor, you get teleported, and there's this huge demon queen, and it's sort of like
an alien.
It's just like an alien. It's got like this big sack on her back. It's like a devil with a huge like egg sack.
Yeah, like it's more specifically the movie Aliens, where there's the alien with the giant. Yeah. Interesting. So it's kind of a mix of a demon, but also like insect based. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Nice.
And there's really nothing special about the fight. Actually, one of the things it does is it debuffs your entire party before you fight. Ooh. So it's like once the reactor blows up, you lose all your buffs. So that's kind of lame. But yeah, it's just like a tank and spank. Nothing really special there. And then you get to a nice little cutscene of the Sweetwater or the Hive being blown up. And you see the spell protecting Enroth from the radiation explosion.
Wow.
And it then, this is all FMV.
Yeah, look at these cannibals celebrating now. They don't want to eat people anymore.
Yeah, all these people that you were fighting before, some of them are with the, I think this is in front of the king, Nikolai, the Prince King Nikolai. Right. And conveniently, all of your heroes are fully armored, so you can't see their heads or their gender. So it's a very generic looking thing. And he just kind of like slaps you a couple times with your sword, and it's like, all right, cool, you're knighted. So a little bit of fanfare there, but again, after 80 hours, you're like, I don't care. Just put up a you win screen, and I'm done. But at the very last thing, you see what appears to be the Archibald, and he's kind of like looking through his crystal, and he's like, oh. So maybe he has more plans.
Oh my!
And that is Might and Magic 6. At the end, you get actually a screenshot which you can print out. It's got it almost looks like a certificate.
Yeah, it's like a diploma. It's like you graduated.
Yeah, it's like a diploma. Yeah. So that's my Magic 6. So I'm real curious based on, your experience with the game here, Lobos, and kind of being spoiled. Is this something you aim to complete, or you think you found everything you needed to see?
I'm going to keep playing it for sure. So unless other things come up that are far more pressing, like I'll keep playing it on Mondays and see if I can reach the end myself.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun once you get those lasers. Yeah, my recommendation, make sure to hold up some points for ancient weapons. Okay. That's what I did because I knew they were coming. But yeah, you want to basically get those because if you have ancient weapons at like level 20 plus you have haste, you're just an armored like Terminator. It's really
Nice.
fun to just go around and shoot. And in fact, a little bit later in the video, if it's still going to be playing after the credits here, I just like walk around New Sorbrigol and just shoot all the civilians. Just
Now, can you train in ancient weapons as soon as you find one? Is that the requirement?
Yeah, so the way it works is when you get, when you in the same area that you find the blaster rifles, there's like a little plaque. And if you read that, it's like, hey, listen up, recruits, this is how you shoot these blaster rifles. And that's what actually trains you in that. And then you can start going to the ancient weapon trainers.
Okay, that's cool.
Oh, all right, so we did manage to complete in an hour and 10 minutes. I feel pretty good about being able to chat about the game here. We didn't get to go into many of the dungeon mechanics, but honestly, I think the dungeons are so fun. And just if this game interests you, there's a lot of surprises in there. Even though we kind of know where it ends up, there's like 20 some dungeons to go through, so it's still a lot of fun. Today.
Yeah, totally. And there's a lot of outdoor areas too that aren't necessarily dungeons, but just kind of more combat things to do, or little huts here and there to find. And now you're murdering the town. So
a lot of backtracking, if you wish, and a lot of exploration, going back in areas that you might not have been able to access before. So it's a lot of fun. So that is Might and Magic 6, The Mandate of Heaven. We wanted to thank everyone for listening to us on the podcast. We actually started publishing this stuff on Lobos's YouTube channel as well as another avenue. And this will come with the video as well.
Yeah,
right?
And if you're listening to this, you're finally caught up on videos. Well, I guess
if you're watching this on the video, you're caught up. If you're listening to us, well, you're also caught up. So. But we did want to give a special shout out to our Patreon supporters. And we actually got 2 new Patreon supporters, which was amazing. So a special shout out to Nakema Boy and Joshua for your support. And in fact, the support of the Patrons is what allowed us to actually start dipping into this type of console, the game we're going to be picking up next.
Yes.
Lobos, why don't you go into a little bit?
That's right. It's a game that I played a bunch when I was a kid, and I love it dearly, and I've speedrun it a bunch. It is Bomberman 64 for the Nintendo 64, of course.
Yeah, we got some original hardware. We're going to be capturing that. I'm super excited to play. And really what I think is great about having this setup is it allows us, this will be our first entry point to N64, but guess what? There are a lot of good N64 games.
Yes.
I don't think it's going to stop here.
Oh yeah. There's plenty of good game and goodness out there.
I want to play Shadowgate.
Oh yes,
N64.
that's great too.
We should do that sometime, but I know the game's not very good.
What?
I mean,
no,
not compared to the other one.
It's great.
Well, sadly, we have reached the end credits of this episode. And again, we wanted to thank everyone for listening to us on the podcast or watching us on YouTube.
Yeah, we release a new podcast monthly, so be sure to follow and subscribe on to the podcast on iTunes, Google, or whichever platform of choice you desire. If you do have any feedback, we'd also love to hear back from you. Shoot us an email at SaturdayMorningGamingShow@gmail.com or follow us on Twitter at SaturdayMGaming.
And a special shout out to TechnoAxe for the intro song on this episode.
For Saturday Morning Gaming, I'm Lobos.
And I'm the Fat Wizard. We'll see you in September with Bomberman 64.